noose is tightening.
His failings are internal. He's useless, incompetent, has no political judgment.
This is all part of Starmer's reset, getting rid of his inner circle. So Chris Wormold, we think fairly reluctantly, has stepped down.
What an absolutely crazy week for Keir Starmer. His second cabinet secretary, gone. His third chief of staff, gone. His fourth director of communications, gone.
Labour MPs, they say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson.
We've now had another resignation from number 10. The plot is thickening, the noose is tightening.
His failings are internal. He's useless, incompetent, has no political judgment.
This is all part of Starmer's reset, getting rid of his inner circle. So Chris Wormold, we think fairly reluctantly, has stepped down.
What an absolutely crazy week for Keir Starmer. His second cabinet secretary.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome to the show. Happy Friday to you all, as you probably are gearing up, ready for the weekend. I'm going to be joining you for the whole bank holiday weekend from 10 until 1. Delighted to have your company right now, and hopefully delighted to have your company as well over the next 3 days. And we do indeed have a lot to talk about today, don't we? It's been a busy old week of news, hasn't it? The state visit over in America. But also, we learned today that the terror threat has now been raised to severe following that appalling attack in Golders Green. And so many of us find ourselves asking, when's it going to end? Big questions today about the nature of society. Behold their virtue. Behold them in their lanyards, waving their placards. How brave and true of spirit they are, fighting for injustice, standing up for the lowly. Oh, their compassion knows no bounds. No depth or breadth is greater than their love for humanity. Even the terrorist is worthy of their defence. This narcissistic sham charade of faux moralising from the far left celebrated and applauded by so many in the media, wanting to also bask in the glow of moral superiority. I'm sorry, it's now reached dangerous levels. He couldn't resist it, could he, Zach Polanski, as soon as he saw a video on social media with the Met Police apprehending a black man? Oh, he was reposting it. Look at this awful racism, isn't it shocking? Except it wasn't the racism he thought it was it? No need to fact check, no need to justify, no need to do research, as long as it's a trendy image that will push the message that here is a man so brilliant, so enlightened, so compassionate, so pure. He was the first to notice this appalling crime against this man. And yet, this faux moralising, this ignorance, this narcissism, this inversion of the truth, it's now leading to murderous intent. It's become a cancer within our society. The gaudy theatre, this morally bankrupt performance art, fueling messianic delusions from people standing on streets, short fringes, nose rings, screaming at the top of their voice, if it isn't for them, the planet will never be saved. And yet the things they are standing for are bankrupting society economically and dividing it morally and spiritually. It's gone too far now that so many people can no longer see the inversion of the truth. They go along with whatever they think they should go along with to look good, to show off on social media that they are all holier than thou. So self-righteous. It's appalling. And it is no wonder that the Green Party want to ban Christianity as the state religion. A theme throughout the Bible sounds as thus. Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. And if you want to go back to the prophets of the Old Testament, then read Isaiah 5:20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes. When's it going to end? When's the hierarchy of victimhood going to be destroyed? When are we all going to grow up? When are we all going to have the courage to speak out and say enough is enough? Don't put us in boxes. Pick your battles based upon wisdom, not on performance and narcissism. Right, well, let's speak now to Philip Kisserly, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. Philip, I mean, it's great, isn't it, that they're saying, whew, Met Police finally having the cojones to turn around and say, well, these pro-Palestine marches probably should have been banned. There was Sir Keir Starmer proselytising from behind a podium, telling that we're all responsible for looking out for Jewish harm. I'm sorry. But the courage of conviction should have happened years ago. This rot has set in for so long now. And it's perfect, isn't it? They don't mind when Jewish people are the victims because they behave well. You know, they deserve it. Most of them are white and middle class. It's all very well. Israel's an evil colonizer. It's just this, the vanity, the narcissism, it's a cancer. And it's leading now to murderous intent.
It is. I was at the just brilliant Alex, your monologue there was just superb and moving, and just the thing that I think people need to hear on this Friday morning. I was at the protest yesterday outside Downing Street because I've been filming all day in Westminster, so I just walked down, and it was exactly as you said. It was people who are frightened, people who are angry, but people who are too nice really to kind of express that anger in more than tuts and one or two shouts. Jacob Rees-Mogg was there. He made a wonderful speech. Toby Young was there. He made a wonderful speech, and Josh Howie as well. But there was a sense of we are coming to the end of our tether with this. I don't think many people in this country realise the depth of Jew hate, the real depth of Jew hate. And there's an extension of that, hatred of Britain and hatred of the West as well, because Israel is always framed as a proxy for the US, isn't it? But most people didn't realise the depth of hatred until after October the 7th. And it seems like from then, this tsunami of anti-Semitism, Jew hate, virulent hatred, horrible, nasty, disgusting hatred has just spewed out all over our cities like a sewer, like a broken sewer. And the politicians have done absolutely nothing about it, because within their ranks, they have people who are saying that they want to globalize the Intifada. If you go to the schools, you will see teachers teaching about anti-Zionism. My God, if you go to the universities, it's riddled with anti-Zionism and Islamism. If you go to the NHS, you're going to get someone with a pro-Palestine flag on. It's right across the institutions. It infects our society. So if what has happened over the last month or so, we've had fire bombings of synagogues, we've had ambulances set on fire, we've had Jews being attacked in the street for being Jews. If that would have happened to any other demographic, the whole country would have come to a standstill. Universities would have been putting up, statements saying, we're in a terrible mess, we are racist, what can we do? We need to pull the whole society apart. But there is nothing. There is silence, because these people are implicated. It's their fault. It's their it's their politics. It's their faux moralization. And you know what? It feels like they've stolen our future.
But
right?
This is the thing, though.
Sorry, just to make the point. Because I was thinking as I was at this demonstration yesterday, I was thinking back to 20 years to the noughties, right? And there was a sense of joy and looking forward about this country, a dynamism about this country. Now, all I see is Islamism, sectarianism, and thousands and millions of small boat migrants coming in and benefits Britain. That's all I see. It feels like that future that we had has been stolen.
Yeah, and we've been warned about it countless times throughout history, countless times as a reader of the Bible. It is there writ large in the Old Testament. But it's not just, it is, I mean, look, today our focus needs to be on the anti-Semitism, but it's the thread, the common thread, that is the rich theme throughout the whole woke movement, the narcissism of the woke movement. Climate change. Where are the victims of climate change? Apparently there are people living on atolls and islands somewhere in the Pacific who will die if we don't do something to protect them. But the real victims of this neo-religion are the men and women losing their jobs, who are being impoverished because they can't heat their homes, their country being industrialised, broken apart, which will soon become carrion for predatory hostile nations. The trans movement, the sexual fetishisation disguised as liberty. Where are the victims of that? We're told that all these trans people around the world are being persecuted, but it's the little girls who no longer have a safe space, whose innocence and intimacy is being corrupted by men who have ill intent. The open borders religion, all these people are victims. We must bow down to them. But they're not the victims, are they? The victims are the multiple women who have been raped and sexually assaulted, and even people who have been murdered hatred, whose communities have been torn apart by importing alien cultures and the appeasement of these alien cultures. This idea that we must bow down on bended knee and beatify whatever it is that they bring, regardless of the fact the real women are those who are forced to cover their faces, have FGM, marry at the age of children. It is the inversion of the truth. It is this idea that the victim is the perpetrator and the perpetrator is the victim. Everything about the woke narcissism of this country, and we've seen it imported from America, it tears a society apart. What are we going to do about it, Philip? What are we supposed to do to root this out when it is so deep set in social media? People breathe it like their oxygen, because without it, where are the thumbs up? Where are the hearts? Where are the likes and the reposts and that sense of I'm brilliant and I'm going to show everybody just how exceptionally pure I am? You're not the Messiah. You're a very, very bad person.
You're a very naughty boy. And it feels as though the people that do, you know, the classic person with green hair and a short fringe festooned in rainbow flags and BLM stickers and worrying about the climate in 700 years' time and welcoming all immigrants because all brown people are lovely, aren't they, are men, all of that kind of stuff. It feels like these people desperately need a purpose in their lives. They've had it too easy. They've never known any. There's a reason why the vast majority of these people are chattering class imbeciles, right? They've never had to struggle for anything. Mummy and daddy have given them everything, and they are on the receiving end of a faux education that is not really about educating and expanding people's minds. It's just about indoctrination, propaganda, and the heart of it, the real heart of it, is hatred. Actually, it's hatred of Britain, it's hatred of self. It's about deconstructing the basics, the building blocks of society, mainly because these people are bored. And wouldn't it be great to look at something else? And we have no understanding of economics. We have no understanding of historical patterns in society. We have no understanding of psychology, and we have no understanding of how people need to act together, how people need a group identity that they can be proud of, a heritage and history that they can refer to so they know where they're going. All of these things are being torn apart. And when those things are torn apart, it's like a mass psychosis, because people, one, don't know who they are, but more importantly, and this is quite difficult to get your head around, they don't know what they are. Literally, these people don't know whether they're men, whether they're women, whether they're global citizens, whether they're British, all of this kind of stuff. And it feels as though we're being pushed and pushed and pushed to a crisis. And there's something for these people, there's something delicious about it. They want it to happen because they've never had anything worthwhile to struggle for in their lives. And do you know what, Alex? I'm sick of it. I'm sick of these people. I'm sick of these people being in power. I'm sick of these people dominating my life. And as I said before, I'm sick of these people stealing my future.
I am sick of their sense of entitlement. I'm sick of their narcissism. I'm sick of their ignorance. I'm sick of their greed, because these are the people who can't go a second without looking at their own reflection or clicking something on social media. The instant gratification. I want, so I must have. No rules apply to me. Let's live in a world without any structure, because structure equals oppression. It is absolutely the positioning of a narcissist, thinking you're better than everybody else, thinking everyone else is stupid, thinking the rules don't apply to you, thinking that rules themselves are only for silly, stupid, weak people. And that everything that has predated the current era, 2,000 years of an organised, sensible society with religion at its feet, which bound us together and helped us sing from the same hymn sheets, mind the pun, has been thrown in the dustbin of history by a feckless, infantile, puerile, dangerous generation now, which really started with my generation, frankly, and is now spread out to the generations below, and until we've got to the state now that, again, we're seeing the terror threat level raised to severe. Why didn't we learn after 9/11? I sat there in sixth form watching those planes fly into that tower. We have seen in the United Kingdom terrorist attack after terrorist attack after terrorist attack after terrorist attack. Multiple innocent lives lost at the mantle of this sick gangster death cult. And still nothing's done. And nothing's done because the politicians would rather grandstand under their own faux self-righteousness, courting a vote of a community who would chew them up and spit them out and would want to destroy this country at the first possible opportunity. I'm not talking about all Muslims, I'm talking about radical Islamists. But they are so desperate to appease, to court the compassion and the celebration of these people who frankly do not belong here. It doesn't matter how many slain bodies lie in the gutter. It doesn't matter how many of our institutions are infected with this cancer, how many wrongs we brush under the carpet. As long as they get to look smug and they get to be applauded by all the people in the right-on crowd, it is just galling. It's galling. And we're all told now Starmer has the temerity, the audacity to stand behind a lectern and preach to all of us that it's all of our responsibility to look out for the Jew hate. The responsibility stopped at your desk the minute you walked into 10 Downing Street, and you, my friend, have pushed the anti-Israeli line. You, my friend, decided to recognise Palestine. You, my friend, were the one to take the knee for BLM and allow your mad energy secretary to cause acts of sabotage against oil wells in this country, now putting us in an energy crisis. It is exactly the performance politics of pure narcissism of the Labour Party which has led us into this. The Conservative Party weren't much better, but it's been turbocharged and put on steroids under Starmer. It's got to stop.
Well, what the hell did they think was going to happen when they imposed mass immigration on us, 20 years ago, okay, or even 30 years ago? What did they think would happen? Did they think that everything would be okay and we'd all live happily ever after and diversity would be our strength and we'll be multicultural and it'll be utopian, it'll be beautiful? It's an insult that they impose that on us, because they can't possibly, in their very, very rare moments of honesty, they can't possibly have thought that people coming from Mogadishu, Somalia, and Eritrea, those kind of people, Afghanistan doesn't even have an age of consent for sex, okay? So people, men coming from those societies and coming to this country, what did they think was going to happen? What they thought...
They didn't think, they didn't care. All they were thinking about is how they looked. They didn't care. They don't care now. They don't care. Even Starmer standing behind that podium yesterday, he doesn't care. It is a performance to save his own skin. They can't see beyond their own reflections, these people. They're Pygmalions, the lot of them.
Yeah, and now we are seeing our society implode. We have gone from, we've transformed from a high-trust society which was moving forward, that was exciting to be in, that was cultural, that was British, that was ours, to an uncivil, dangerous, uncivilized country that, frankly, I don't recognise anymore. And the people who I love and who I care for are saying to themselves, well, actually, we need to get out of here because it isn't safe for us to live here anymore. And in 10 years' time, when we've got, 7.3 million more migrants coming into the country and transforming it, it will be even worse. But what the politicians, what the blob, what the educators, what the intellectuals will not do, they will not say that we have a problem, one, with aggressive, sexually aggressive migrants, and 2, with Islamism. That's the problem, and it's compounded by identity politics. Mass immigration, Islamism, identity politics, they are our problems. They are what we need to deal with. Until we do that, we will just go down the toilet.
But it's this inversion of the truth, which anybody with half a brain cell can see has gone on, that we're told Reform UK and, you know, the Conservative Party, the nasty party, they're the racists, they're the dangerous ones, they're the divisive ones, they need to be stopped. Anybody but Reform. Nigel Farage, what a threat to the world he is. This is the very movement in politics. On the right wing, I'm not going to say a particular party, but in general, the right wing are the Liberals. The right wing are the ones who want to defend the realm, secure our borders, make a society prosperous, allow trade to flourish. It is the left wing who are embittered and filled with hate, who are the dangerous ones, who wants to divide society, who are the real racists, who are fueled by narcissism. And yet we're being told all the time it's completely the opposite. I mean, Andy from Thatcham said prescribe the Green Party. If there was such racism, if there was such radicalism in the ranks of any other political movement, it's all we would have heard about for years and years and years, and yet they have grown now in stature to a point that Zach Polanski's applauded on all the main political shows. There he is on stage in the middle of Trafalgar Square twerking with some man in chaps. And nobody's questioned anything until today. Until all of a sudden it emerges some Green Party candidates have been saying some pretty choice things on X, until he's been reposting a video of the arrest of the attack in Golders Green, instead trying to focus it in on faux police brutality that didn't exist. And finally, they're going, oh, they should have known from the start. And I don't buy for 1 minute their ignorance. They're cowards because they're self-serving. All of them out there who've not dared speak the truth. It's because they want to stay in with the in crowd. That's it. Right. Listen, guys, keep your messages coming in. We're also going to be keeping Phillips, so don't go anywhere because we got a lot to talk about today, don't we? Lots to get off our chests in our little session of communal catharsis. Your Talk Towers therapy session begins now. 0344499 1000. It's your normal network rate. Imagine getting therapy for free anywhere else. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. I do love a good voice note. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send a text message. If you're going to do that, do write talk before you write your text. OK, get your thoughts coming in. Let's all get together and put the world to rights, because I don't know how long we can tolerate this nonsense anymore. Let's all take a breather, put the kettle on, and let's regroup just after this.
the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to Philip Kissley as well. Let's talk about the anyone but Ange, which is a plot to block Angela Rayner from number 10. Labour MPs think members will back Starmer's former deputy for the leadership, and many now are trying to struggle to find an alternative. I mean, the thing is, there have been reports, haven't there, about her being drunk in Strangers' Bar in Parliament. Dan Hodges, the columnist at the Daily Mail, saying, I was there, I saw her grandstanding and then smashing into a door. And the argument wasn't, you know, should our politicians be Puritans who don't have a drink? I think the argument is about, are you really a serious person? Because this isn't a parade. This isn't a float in the Notting Hill Carnival. This is the future of the country.
Yeah, it feels like I look at Angela Rayner and I think I would be embarrassed if this person was representing me on the world stage for one main reason. Okay, it isn't because she's working class. It isn't because you know, she's northern. I'm all of those things. It's one very simple reason, and it's the fact that she's as thick as two short planks, and that is actually, it's very dangerous for us, because she would just be a puppet of the union. She will just be, it's like she's on strings, you know, and that we've seen what happens when the unions become extremely strong and extremely powerful. You only have to go back to the mid to late 1970s and the winter of discontent. I look at her and I'm filled with dread, because we have all of this cultural upheaval. It feels like society is turning itself inside out. What we will also have is economic meltdown if she steps into number 10. And when all of those factors come together, it will be a perfect storm, and people, the country, will suffer massively.
I mean, the thing is, she also pretty much embodies the puerile idento-narcissism of the left, doesn't she? You know, it's all fun and games. Oh, wouldn't it be great if Ange was Prime Minister? Look at her in hot pants at the front of the Pride March. I'm sorry. We live in very serious times. We're about to face some form of economic oblivion as the crisis deepens in the Middle East, because we've had no energy self-sufficiency for decades now. We've been lackadaisical and feckless when it comes to being serious about how we run this country. Again, multiple governments would rather bow down at the altar of faux ideologies than actually make sensible, practical, pragmatic policy choices. But she embodies the lot of this, doesn't she? You know, I can't imagine if we get to a stage where there's a meeting about the future of NATO, or the G7 are coming together, or we're in a position where actually talks between Russia and Ukraine become serious, where we have to make decisions about whether we deploy troops and how much we'd want to get involved with the security and protection of Ukraine. All of these things, I just think that she's basically like a Hallmark card.
Yeah, she's representative of pretty much everything that's wrong with this country, in the sense that she isn't there because of her ability. She is there because she's a working class woman. That donkey's years anymore. Out is safety. What we care about is border. What we care about is crime. What we care about are women and children. What we care about is our culture. All of those things, which she is fundamentally unprepared and unable to deal with, and that's the problem. So she represents all of, she's, you know, you look at her and you understand why education is in such a terrible mess. You understand why the institutions are in such a terrible mess. This is about people who are there because of their characteristics and not their ability. And this, you know, this has been the problem with the labor movement since the 19th century, okay? It's gone on steroids over the last 20 years, and we are looking to pay the price. And we can't afford to do that. That's the problem. As a society, there's nothing there culturally, economically, socially. There's nothing in the bank. We don't have anything. We are running on empty because our country and our culture has been degraded over the last 30 years, and she and people like her have done it. They are not the solution. They are the problem.
Do you think they just don't get it, that they're stupid, or they are so wedded to the self-aggrandizement, the kick, the dopamine hit they get from, you know, blurting out these vacuous platitudes, that they just won't part with them, whatever the cost? She's there, right? I've got a quote from an interview she did on Thursday night on The Bloomin' Rest is Politics, talking about vacuous platitudes and narcissists, where she revealed her 29-year-old son was struggling to make ends meet, and young people like him now feel like the system is going to be rigged against them. She said her son works really long hours but struggles to make ends meet. Can't afford a dentist. When he had problems with his teeth, he had asked me to borrow to get his teeth done. Well, I'm like, perhaps if we hadn't had mass immigration leading to wage compression, he might have better take-home pay. He might have been able to buy his own house and get on the property ladder if there wasn't a dire housing shortage due to overpopulation. Perhaps he'd be able to afford to go to a dentist because there wouldn't be long wait lists because of the pressure on the system, again, because of open borders policy, because we've actually kneecapped capitalism and any way of making money in this country. We've flushed prosperity down the toilet because, again, of these sort of performance politics. I just feel they're so wedded to them that they're just, you know, they don't care about the real life impact, even if it's their own family.
Well, no, they don't, because what you're talking about there, all of those examples you gave are cause and effect. And if there's one thing that the identitarian left do not understand, it's cause and effect. You know what I mean? We only have to go back to what's been happening to the Jewish community. You know, all these terrible things are happening. It's a tragedy, but they will not look to the source of the problem. And it's the same with the economy, the same with the broader culture. And as I say, we have been saddled with this view of the world for so long, and it's so all-pervasive, and it's so damaging. But there's something else as well, isn't there? There's a kind of, you know, Gadsar calls it
suicidal empathy.
And so there is something about that. People, again, it comes back to this fact that people just want drama in their lives in a way, and they want to feel as though they're struggling. Even though they're massively privileged, they want to feel as though they're victims and oppressed because that's fashionable and that is good and that is virtuous, and
because it affirms them, it strokes their egos.
Yeah.
Oh, Philip, we've got to say goodbye now. We've had a lovely, good old long chat, haven't we? Let's do it again next week. The brilliant Philip Kisserly there. We're going to take a short break and then we're going to get quite serious, because joining us after the break is Chris Phillips, who's the former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. On the day that the threat level has been raised to severe, we're going to be asking him, how did we get here and what does this mean going forward?
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Well, today the terror threat level has been raised to severe after the Golders Green attack, and police are reviewing whether to ban upcoming pro-Palestine protests. As a result, let's speak now to Chris Phillips, former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. Now, I remember back under the Conservative government when people like Suella Braverman called these hate marches. I remember hearing about the counter-extremism czar Robin Simcox warning that these were enabling the curation and coordination of violent extremism. And yet nothing has been done. It's only until people are being stabbed in broad daylight that there is a compulsion now to say, perhaps we've got this wrong. Well, I say blood on their hands, quite frankly. Why is it taking so long for people in positions of power, whose authority it is to deal with this stuff, to actually make these necessary calls, or at least suggest that they might ponder making these necessary calls?
Well, a little bit of cowardice, I think, Alex, actually. I think people have been very slow to realise the dangers in allowing this rhetoric that we heard on these marches. By the way, I don't think that's the only reason that the threat level's gone up, but certainly it's one of them. We've allowed people to become more and more extreme, and social media doesn't help. It certainly doesn't. In fact, it inflames the people themselves. But we've also allowed this to be shouted on the streets of our country. And of course, if I was a Jewish person, I would feel absolutely scared out of my wits that people were doing this and openly mocking and attacking Jews, take away from the fact the terrorist attacks that have taken place.
Let's talk about all the various reasons why the terror threat level may have recently been raised. One assumes it's because, amongst other things, the Iranian embassy in the United Kingdom actually called for people to go out onto the streets and slaughter Jewish people. I'd assume that definitely turned up the heat a bit. Are there other reasons that we haven't been told?
I think that is probably one of the big ones. The Iranians, of course, now, they're not able really to fight the US in their own country. Their only option is to wake up their proxies that they've implanted into the UK and into the US and other countries to get them to do their dirty work for them. And we're going to see that, I'm sure. And we've already seen the Russians engaging people within the UK to commit acts of terror, whether it's criminal damage or whether it's burning places down or assaults and things. So I think it's a general problem around the world that's coming home to roost, alongside the fact that we've got too many problems here for the police to deal with.
It's the Home Office have put out, I mean, it just, eye roll, big sigh, a statement saying, the terror threat level's been raised because of, the real risk of Islamist terror attacks and far-right terrorist attacks. They can't help themselves. They have to say the word far-right if they're going to say Islamist. They cannot bear the idea of apportioning blame to just something that might emanate from Islam. And yet, I'm wondering, and I don't know if you agree with me here, when I look at the people who've bashed a policewoman over their head with a mallet, when I look at people who are actively blocking ambulances, when I look at the movement, frankly, that enables Islamism to take root in this country, and actually is, I would argue, the very cause of there being this backlash in the form of far-right racism, it's the far left. It's the far left. And we don't even talk about that.
It's very clear that, even MI5 come out and say it, 75% of their work is actually Islamist terrorism. They have been allowed to fester. It's been allowed to fester in the UK. And I mean, I use this analogy, really. It's a bit like if you fill your basement with petrol, don't be surprised when you find at some stage it's very flammable, it's likely to go bang, and it's very difficult to solve the problem. So this is a problem that we've allowed to happen over generations.
But what of the left-wing movements, though? This is what I want to know. As former head of national counter-terrorism, what of the left-wing movements? Because throughout history, whether it's been the CND or whether it's been, you know, various environmental activists, we know that they have been infiltrated by hostile states in order to push public opinion and push government agenda in a certain direction. But like I said, I'm sorry, when we look at all these various marches, the pro-Palestine marches, it's entities such as the Socialist Workers' Party who's producing all of the blimmin' placards. And I just never hear, you know, Antifa are a violent, vile mob. If you look at over in America, in the wake of BLM, there were people being attacked, businesses being bashed up. Every time I see people causing destruction and division in society, it ain't the right wing, it is the extreme left. Oh, is counter-terrorism ever looking at them?
Oh, for sure. And you're absolutely right. Their stated aim is, Marxism is to bring down the government and change the way we live. So it's, it's there. I think the government know all about it. They frightened to really verbalise that. And of course, you now have a socialist party in power who, you know, many of these people would have voted for them. So I think the big issue now for the Labour Party is that we've got the Greens who are even further and a bigger problem, which is probably going to push the Labour Party more to the centre ground.
Right. It's like trying to cure lung cancer by smoking, it seems to me. Chris Phillips, it's always a pleasure and a privilege to have you on the show, former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. OK, let's take another short break. After that, let's look at another way that left-wingery has imploded our society, shall we? As we're probably about to face a huge economic shock. Of course, everyone's going to point the finger at Donald Trump. It must be his fault. I'm sorry, no. The first responsibility of a government is to protect its own people in case there happen to be acts of God or perhaps foreign acts of war that might disrupt supply chains. It's all very well blaming everybody else. I'm afraid the buck stops with whoever sits in number 10. And when it comes to the terrible state of our national finances, well, we know it's weeping Rachel, don't we? Let's discuss all of that with Julian Jessup, who's a brilliant economist, just after the break.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we learned today that inflation could surge past 6% if the war in the Middle East triggers a prolonged energy price shock. That's according to the Bank of England. Well, I'd put that in your pipe and smoke it, because I'm pretty sure that Donald Trump is not about to completely resolve things in the Middle East. In fact, I think things are going to start significantly hotting up. Let's speak to Julian Jessup, who's a fantastic economist. Now, of course, when things get difficult, they will all point to the Strait of Hormuz. They'll point to Donald Trump. They'll blame it all on him, like they blamed COVID, like they blamed Ukraine, like they blamed everybody but themselves. Successive governments and chancellors now, when frankly, it is them. It is them because we're not energy self-sufficient. It is them because we don't have enough food that we create by ourselves. It's all them, isn't it?
Well, there's certainly something in that. Obviously, this is a global shock affecting economies around the world. So Europe is struggling to, even the US is suffering from higher fuel prices. So it is primarily a global shock. But you're absolutely right. The UK seems to be suffering more than other countries. If we look, for example, at the cost of government borrowing, that's the highest in the UK of any of the sort of comparable major economies. So there is an inflation problem in the UK. There's a problem of lack of credibility in the way the government is managing the public finances in particular. And we're all paying the price for that.
I mean, how is this going to translate for ordinary men and women in terms of mortgages, borrowing costs, in terms of food prices? Because we're learning as well, fertiliser is in very short supply, which could well trigger incredible problems around the world. I think it's something like 10 billion meals a day are potentially being lost as a result of farmers, especially in the developing world, not being able to access fertiliser. But how are things going to look for people here?
Well, we're already starting to see some of the effects of that, of course. So inflation picked up in March because of the increased costs of petrol and diesel at the pumps. It might fall back in April just for some technical reasons to do with some of the changes in regulated prices set by the government. But we probably will see inflation rise further to about 4% over the summer. And as you say, there are easily scenarios where it could rise as high as 6%. And that would, of course, squeeze people's purchasing power. Wages are not going to rise anywhere near as much as 6%, even in the public sector. So people are going to find that their money doesn't go as far as otherwise have done. I think the reassuring point, though, is that despite the talk from the Bank of England over the last few days, I don't think they will actually raise interest rates. Frankly, there's not a lot of point in doing so. Higher interest rates are not going to prevent food and energy prices rising. The only reason to raise rates will be because you're worried about the second round effects on the rest of the economy. But precisely because the economy is weak and the labour market is struggling, I think the Bank of England can afford to keep rates on hold, which will provide at least a little bit of reassurance to those who are worried about interest rates going up.
If we had a right-minded chancellor who wanted to do whatever it takes to rescue the British economy, what should they be doing?
Well, I think, to be fair to Rachel Reeves, she's right not to try and bail everybody out with even more subsidies. I think that's the wrong response to a shock of this type. I think any support should be targeted only at those people and businesses that need it the most. But the bigger problem, of course, is that we've gone into this crisis with the public finances in a pretty poor state, reflected, as I say, in those relatively high borrowing costs. And nothing that Rachel Reeves has really done has improved the underlying state of the public finances. So borrowing is down, but only because she's raised taxes an awful lot, particularly taxes on jobs. It's not down because she's controlled spending. And that, I think, is the big problem. And that's the thing the markets are worried about, particularly if we get a more left-wing government, or an even more left-wing government taking over in the next few weeks. If we don't control spending, then we can't control borrowing. And we're going to have to continue to pay relatively high interest rates as a result.
Is there a possibility there could be light at the end of the tunnel, the form of some kind of reprieve as a result of, it's a bit of a niche story, but what's going on with OPEC? The UAE have decided that they're going to leave OPEC. They have recently built a pipeline which essentially circumvents the Strait of Hormuz. And it seems to me they want to start pumping oil cheaply. If that happens, would that have a positive effect in the United Kingdom?
Yes, it's worth saying that when we talk about oil prices, people tend to focus about where oil prices are now or where they're expected to be in the next month or two. And those are the big scary numbers, which are shot up to, say, $125, $130 a barrel. But the markets still expect oil prices to drop back sharply by the end of the year, back to, say, 90 or even $80 a barrel. So that's still higher than before the Iran war, but not as high as they are now. And one reason for that is the assumption that there'll be more supply coming on stream. Now, I know people don't like prices rising, but one of the side effects of that is that there's more incentive for companies and countries to produce more oil and gas if they can. So higher prices in the short term are really painful, but they provide the incentive, the profit for companies like BP to go out and produce more oil and gas and get prices down again.
And in terms of people listening to this who might be thinking whether they can afford a holiday this year or what their heating bills might be like going forward or how much it's going to cost to feed the family, what would you advise them?
Well, my advice is usually don't panic. I mean, there are always lots of, big scary stories around any of these shocks. But if you look at, for example, what the Bank of England was forecasting yesterday, it did present one scenario where inflation might go to 6%. But its main scenario, the thing that it thought most likely to happen, is inflation might rise from 3.3 to about 3.5%, but then drop back sharply next year. As far as things like people's travel plans over the summer, I mean, the government has put out some, quite good advice here about the risks of prices jumping or flights not being put on. I would say, step back a bit, read the advice and plan carefully, but don't panic.
There you go. Sensible advice indeed. Always a good idea to keep a cool head when the economy gets rather hot. Julian Jessup, brilliant economist, thank you ever so much for joining us. Right, keep your thoughts coming in about everything we're talking about today's shows. I promise to read out more of them after the break and hopefully get some of you on the phone as well at some point in the future. You can call at any time and register your interest. We actually give you a call back. 03444991000 is the number to give me a call. It's your normal network rate, and to send me a WhatsApp message 87222 to send a text message. Make sure you write the word talk before you do text. Okay, we are going to be taking a short break, but I'm very much looking forward to getting some of you on the phone. I think we're looking to do that around 11:20 today, so it's a perfect opportunity to give us a call now and get yourself in the queue for a bit of communal catharsis. All right, put the kettle on and I'll see you in just a second.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, aren't you looking spiffing today? Great to have your company. I always love it when we have a convention of the Patriots every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And this week, of course, I always get to enjoy your company because it's a bank holiday Monday. So I will still be here as the new week commences. And hopefully as you guys are getting a little bit of well-earned rest, I'll be there to keep you company should you so wish to have it. And just to remind you, the number if you want to get in touch with the show, because after this segment we are hopefully going to go to some calls, 0344 499 1000, and it is your normal network rate. The beautiful Faith is waiting on the phone lines, ready to take down your number and sort everything out. What a fine young woman she is as well. Now, let's do some messages. I promised I would. Good morning, Alex. Why are Labour MPs blaming the right wing for the attacks on Jews? It's nothing to do with the right wing. It's Muslims that are doing the attacks. The leftists say the right are dangerous and violent. Really? Well, why are the left wing trying to burn down Nigel Farage's house? Why is it they are the ones who attack him on the street, throwing stuff in his face? Now the country is on high alert, but the lefties are still welcoming all those people in dinghies who hate us into the country. Who's dangerous? Asks Kelvin in Macclesfield. Exactly. Do you know what is the root of all of it? If you took far leftism out, Islamism wouldn't be able to take root. And there is extreme right-wing stuff. It's really emerging now, but it is in response to all of this. The common denominator, the root cause, the primary tumour that is metastasising around the body politic is extreme leftism. We've got to do something about it. We've got to get real. Do we? No. Has anyone ever asked the Socialist Workers' Party? Now, where do you get the funding to make all those placards? Who are your leaders? You call yourself a political party. Who do you stand for? Let's hold you accountable. No. And yet there they are, week after week after week around the country with all their ready-made placards on whatever is the trendy, extremist, leftist position that people are running along screaming about that day just so they can go viral on social media or at least get 20 of the saddos give them a thumbs up. And you wonder why we've got a mental health crisis in this country as well. Why don't we take the terror watch list and anybody that's a dual national, they can go? I'm fed up with paying millions in taxpayers' money to monitor people that wish to cause us harm. Surely that would help if at least half the terror issues that we're having. We don't need these people. We don't want these people. I don't care what they pay in tax. I don't care what they contribute. They're not welcome if they are anti-British and anti-English, says Andy in Walsall. Beth in Cromer, got your message. Keep ranting the truth, I'm with you. I didn't think it was so much of a rant today. Thought it was more a sermon, if you will. And Mark in Selby says the British society where once all in a family worked and idlers would bring shame. A society where crime was generally low and gun and knife violence so sporadic so as to always be headline news in the tabloids. A society where police could manage easily all the crime because we as a society had grown to a level of harmony that is far ahead of developing worlds. That utopia was hard-earned, lives given in war, deaths in law enforcement. British society has been over-diluted with a naive, brutal and simple society, not yet as advanced as ours. The two don't mix well, as the standards we expect of people in Britain are thrown away. Couldn't agree more with much of what you say there. OK, now let us welcome to the show the excellent Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism, to go through all the big news stories of today. Always great having you here, Mark. Let's first of all, let's talk about Zach Polanski. We've been needing to talk about Zach Polanski for a while, haven't we? Except we haven't. Yeah. Oh, he's been welcomed on all the panels with his gappy teeth and his twerking with men in leather chaps. Isn't he wonderful? Isn't it refreshing? Isn't this just all a jolly ha-ha? The young people must love it. How progressive. Just a bit of fun, all of that. It's like Glastonbury now can be voted for. Except it's not, is it?
No. Look, I think we've got to realise that the Green Party, personified by Zach Polanski, has changed radically in quite a short number of months. They're no longer just a bunch of tree huggers that we might think we can ridicule a little or feel sorry for. They've become a pretty dangerous political party, and some of his takes on unfolding events in North London were just extraordinary. If we are remotely serious about security, we have to allow brave police officers to do their jobs, and we have to realise that they are often putting their lives on the line, and they are having to make instantaneous judgment calls with a very limited amount of information in seconds. And Zach Polanski appears worried that they're overstepping the mark. We are not going to be able to keep our streets safe. We are not going to be able to recruit any more police officers if every police officer is concerned that they are on a permanent watch for overstepping the mark, that they need to not display bravery but abide by health and safety standards, and that our political leaders are going to frown upon them if they use any sort of level of physical violence in order to apprehend a potentially hugely dangerous assailant. It is dangerous, what Polanski has said. I rarely agree, actually, with the head of the Met, Sir Mark Rowley, but I'm delighted that he has hit back. If politicians want to criticise the actions of our various state authorities and agencies, they're entitled to do so. But I expect those agencies to hit back, and Mark Rowley has hit back with quite a punch.
And I'm pleased he has, because I think that this has been brewing for quite some time. Do you remember? I can't remember what it was in the aftermath of, but he had come out of a meeting in Downing Street, hadn't he? And a journalist had tried to ask him a question. He sort of angrily pushed the microphone away. And I think that for a long time he's been wanting to say, actually, the scourge that we're inundated with trying to tackle is societal and being provoked by policies and weak leadership, or in fact perverse politicians is what I think it is rather than weak leadership. I have a feeling there are a lot of people there who it's been protocol to sort of, keep stum when it comes to political positioning, who have been wanting to scream from the rooftops for a long time. It's not our fault, it's these people.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, we've got to be careful here in that I'm not sure I want the head of the Metropolitan Police making policy pronouncements. And we heard in your news bulletin just a few minutes ago that the Met are saying, look, we can't ban protests, that's a matter for Parliament. I do think it's fair for the police to make these points. I don't think they should welcome or encourage any particular policy route. That's for the people that we put into the House of Commons. That's for the people that we elect to run our government. But it is reasonable for us to say that the problems we now face in Britain, especially with the wave of horrific anti-Semitism, the toxic culture that has been allowed to develop and is now turning violent, is a policy matter, not merely a policing matter. It is not just a case of putting more cops on the street or having a slightly larger budget for a particular area of London that we know to be dangerous. Those things might be welcome, but to some degree, they're bolting the door after the horse has left, right? So what we've actually got to look at is some pretty serious policy solutions. Where do we think the line is between mob rule and freedom of assembly? What do we actually consider constitutes incitement to racial violence? Are we actually going to arrest and charge these people who are guilty of it? If we do, are we confident that they will face a proportionate and serious sentence or are just released out onto the streets after having spent a couple of hours in a police prison cell? All of those are questions for Keir Starmer, not for Mark Rowley.
What sort of policies do you think he might pursue? Because it appeared to me that he was suggesting that the government might crack down on radical preachers. Why is that not happening anyway, pray tell? But also, suggesting that when people are shouting things like globalise the intifada, it is actively calling for attacks on Jewish people. And we've all known this for ages. People have come on this show for years now, ever since October the 7th, when these chants started happening, saying this is disgusting, this is perverse, this is sick. If we've been talking about it, why on earth have the government, and not just the Labour government, but the Conservative government before them, been so cloth-eared on this matter, not wanting to do anything about it, pretending there's nothing to see here, imagining that actually, well, who knows, jihad might just be, if you translate it a certain way, a lovely peaceful struggle. How gorgeous is that? How warming. We should all be delighted to have these people in our communities. I don't understand that it has taken bloodshed yet again, but it's not the first time. if it was the first time we had seen some sort of Islamist attack or attack on Jewish people, we might suddenly go, blimey, we need to have these conversations. I'm sorry, but we've just had the King come back from America where he went to the 9/11 memorial. We have known for a heck of a long time the danger in our midst. Why have we not done anything about it?
Political cowardice is the answer to that, Alex, sadly. The Prime Minister has a lot of explaining to do. I don't know why the scales have only just now apparently fallen from his eyes. He's only just today realised that globalise the Intifada as a chant is a call for racist, anti-Semitic violence. Why he was incapable of reaching that conclusion many, many moons ago, he will have to explain. I think perhaps reality has hit him like a brick in the face. Let's absolutely hope so. So great, he's taken that step, but it seems to have been drawn out of him rather than it becoming instinctive for him. I think we are also, thankfully, in the position in which senior public servants or leading politicians issuing statements of word salad after horrific events is just not going to be tolerated by the British public any longer. Saying we stand with the Jewish community, perfectly nice thing to say, but doesn't get you anywhere. We now need action. We needed action many, many days, weeks and months ago. Let's hope this finally triggers it. But incitement to racial violence, globalise the Intifada, is exactly that. Chanting that, waving flags with that, tweeting that is a call to racist violence. And those people need to be caught, arrested, prosecuted, and face a serious penalty. Let's hope that comes in now, but it should have come in some time ago. We have allowed a culture to develop here because of cowardice and inaction, which is likely to foment ghastly sorts of events like the one we saw in Golders Green. Let's just work out how bad things have got. We have allowed morphing from apparently merely a criticism of the behaviour of the State of Israel into an unbelievable tirade of racist anti-Semitism. That's what we've allowed by not nipping things in the bud. This would be the equivalent of having, American tourists randomly stabbed in Piccadilly Circus because people don't like Donald Trump. It has got totally and utterly out of control. So decisive action now. I think we've got to overcorrect, frankly, around anti-Semitism, overcorrect. I am a free speech warrior. I do want people to be able to voice controversial opinions, even opinions I firmly disagree with, and perhaps even opinions I find disgusting. But when it spills over into an incitement to violence, that I think you can just about now establish the cause and effect between the more you allow this, the more likely violence against innocent civilians is going to happen. And it's incited by this because it's been tolerated. Well, then the Prime Minister and the state's foot needs to be put down. And it's not okay for him just to say this is unacceptable when for months he has been simultaneously and obviously accepting all of the things that he considers unacceptable.
Now, I have a feeling we might disagree on something at the moment, which is you talk about overcorrecting and serious policies needing to be put in place to deal with this scourge. And unfortunately, Mark, I've now got what I'd call the convert of the zeal of a convert when it comes to social media, because I took the period of Lent off social media and really kind of reflected on it. And I've come to the conclusion, because I took the time also to really look at what it's doing to society, and I came to the conclusion that actually it's a common denominator among many social ills, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's these sorts of neo-religions springing up, top-down activism, the augmentation of extremist political movements, the fact that foreign countries use the entire premise of social media as a psyop against us. In China, they ban the damn stuff, and yet they will pump what they've got there in Chinese social media, is pumping their younger generations with maths challenges and things like that. Great, let's make a working population of the future. I'm not saying we emulate them, but at the same time, they're using their own platforms to get our kids to think they need to mutilate their genitals and hate Jewish people. And at what point do we actually go, OK, this brilliant technology that was supposed to bring the world together, create a global network of human communication, isn't doing that? in fact, is becoming a bit of a crisis, and perhaps we need to have a look at how we might manage that. I mean, like I said, I know you're more of a libertarian than I am. I'm far from a libertarian in some respects, but I've really come to the conclusion, having had my sort of moment of stepping back, and I really don't want to go back on it, I do every now and then, of going, that's it. That is the common denominator, and that is the stuff that nobody really wants to do anything about, because it ends up treading into the territory of this idea of censorship and cracking down on free speech. What is the answer there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I tend to think that social media is the symptom rather than it is the cause. That if various ill-informed ideas even, or, you know, wrong-headed opinions, let alone brutal racism and anti-Semitism, is prevailing in the culture, you'll notice it on social media, a more permanent imprint than somebody, I don't know, saying something inappropriate down the pub, which, you know, vanishes after a couple of seconds. So we can see, if we put the entirety of the UK's Twitter feed in aspic today, we can see what people are thinking and feeling. But I think that's a reflection of an underlying social phenomenon, not the cause of it. We are being too tolerant, for example, I think, on allowing universities to inculcate anti-Semitism on campus. I want, again, universities to be bastions of free speech in which controversial views are pronounced and cross-examined and debated. But I think if there are any universities in which anti-Semitism is being inculcated, the state should cease funding them, cease giving them support. So I think social media almost goes a little bit too high up the agenda, because we can see it so clearly. You can flag it, you can report it, you can repost it, you can disagree with it. It sits there forever. Even if you try deleting your tweets on X, somebody will recover them. But that's, as I say, the symptom, not the underlying cause. The underlying cause is that we have allowed anti-Semitism to become commonplace and acceptable in polite society. And that's the bit that needs correction. If you correct that underlying cause, you will see less vile hatred in this direction on social media platforms.
I'm sure you'll also agree with what Nigel Farage has said, which is sort of pointing out that young people are being indoctrinated in schools and universities to think the political views of the right are evil. We know this goes on. I mean, look, again, before social media and before the existence of Nigel Farage, well, I'm sure he did exist during this period, but we know that there's always been this trend among sort of young people to join very left-wing organisations and to, you know, think they're all wonderful socialists and communism's cute and all the rest of it, and then they grow up and suddenly go, well, that was mad, wasn't it? That was a wasted youth. I should have known better. But this has now become piquant, hasn't it, on campuses, because it has now become a situation where university lecturers are ostracised, demonised, under attack, thrown out of their institutions if they say anything against these neo-religions that profess to be the higher truth. And then you've got people like the various education unions saying, wow, right-winger is so bad, we've really got to teach kids in school how dangerous this stuff is. And you think, what on earth?
Yeah. And this has got worse, I think, Alex. Yeah. You're right that I think there's always been a tendency for young folk to be somewhat revolutionary and counterculture. That's kind of okay. The problem is that the teaching profession itself is no longer representative. And the sort of diversity I want in our schools and universities is I'm less bothered about diversity between people of different sexes, different religions, different creeds. I want diversity of opinion. And overwhelmingly now, university teachers, professors, and teachers in schools up and down the land are of a leftist bent. The bit that we need to correct is not to say that everybody must be of a rightist bent, but that there must be genuine diversity of thought and opinion. And these people who may hold these truths to be self-evident for them should not be presenting them as fact to their children. That they're teaching. So we need a whole overhaul of the state education system, not because there is a particular credo or manifesto that I want preached, but because I want to stop the political bias which clearly and self-evidently prevails in schools up and down the land, universities too. And I think if universities can't show that they are displaying a wide diversity of ideas in faculty, also on platforms for debates and the rest of it, then they're not really universities, they're private members' clubs for people of a particular ideological bent and shouldn't receive state support.
Oh, they're sort of weird hippie sects and cults more than anything these days.
That's right.
Oh, Mark, it's so good catching up with your brilliant voice of reason. That's why we keep having you back on. The excellent Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. Right, let's read some of your messages now before we get you to give us a call. I think there's some brilliant ones that have coming in. Alan in Pimlico says... well, it says the BBC and Sky, let's call it legacy media, have contributed a lot to this anti-Semitism with their one-sided commentaries. You're right. The reporting of Gaza was like some sort of football match with the commentators clearly favouring one side. I've never seen anything like it. The fetishisation of war. Don't care about what's going on in Sudan, do they? Nah, don't you mind them. Starmer can talk as much as he wants, says Glenn from Broadstairs. Action is needed now. First, prescribe the IRGC immediately. Send a signal. Why has that not happened? Why have we not done that? They blew it at the embassy. They said, go on, everyone go out. If you're an Iranian in the diaspora, living in Europe, living in Britain, go and attack Jewish people. And we're still like, yeah, let's not prescribe the IRGC. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. What is wrong with you people? What is wrong with you? Oh, good morning, Alex, says Josie. Whatever happened to Boris's water cannons? That would sort out the ridiculous demonstrations in London streets. Not violent, just very wet. Oh, I can tell you what happened to them, Josie. I've seen them in action when I was living in Kenya. That's right, they got sold and now they're being put to good use whenever things get a little bit tasty in Nairobi. No doubt there was some sort of elf and safety. Well, you can't do that. Someone might, I don't know, fall over and get a bruise. John in Kent says, if Mark Rowley can't ban the marches in London, how come that UKIP protest was banned in Tower Hamlets? Don't know. Does anyone have the answer to that? Someone else has said, listening to you talk about Zach Polanski and the communication he received from Mark Rowley, I believe that Zach Polanski has put as one of his aims of the Green Party to defund the police. Can you just imagine the anarchy on the streets? This is what I'm talking about. This extreme leftism isn't cute. It's blimmin' dangerous. OK, right, 03444991000 is the number to call if you want to have a chat with me live on air, because that's what we're doing just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, got some breaking news for you, which is that Essa Suleiman, 45 years old, has been remanded in custody after appearing at Westminster Magistrates Court, charged with attempted murder over the stabbings of 2 Jewish men in Golders Green, North London. Now, word to the wise before we take calls, which is it is rightful protocol in these circumstances, once somebody has been charged, to then not start talking about them or what they did or giving too much opinion on it. And we do that because it might prejudice a jury. It is a long-held tradition in this country that everyone deserves a fair trial. And if the defensive barrister can argue, well, you know, everyone was talking about Essa Suleiman and who he is and where he came from and what he did and what his motivations were and what should have happened with him, that actually all the people who might decide if this person gets locked up for life or not might have had their arm twisted by things they'd read. So let us bear that in mind. We now have an active charge. So as much as there are many things we all want to say, it is correct that it is due process right now that we don't. Because when people do atrocious things, they really do need to be sentenced for a very long time. So we've got to make sure that all trials run freely and fairly so we get the right results. OK, it is time to take some calls now. Let's speak to Chris in Epsom. Good morning to you, Chris.
Hi, Alex. Enjoying your show as usual this morning. I've got a couple of things I want to just mention. First of all, you just answered one of my queries about Boris's water cannons. They cost us £300,000. He was told by Theresa May he was never going to get permission to use them. So to prove that Johnson was useless, our great mayor, Sadiq Khan, that's doing such a great job, sold them for scrap for 12 grand to a northern scrap dealer, and they've ended up in Kenya. I wonder what Kenya paid for them. I always wonder where they went to.
Oh, I seen them. I seen them on the streets of Nairobi with mine own eyes.
Oh, God, we could use them here. I've got the thing. I want to talk about the arrest, about what's being said about the police action. I would like to say that...
Is this about Zach Polanski's comments about what... So he saw the vision of the Met Police apprehending the suspect in Golders Green, and someone had said, you know, made the usual overtures of police brutality, because this is what they do. You know, as soon as it's somebody of colour and law enforcement, well, the evil people must be the law enforcement and the victim has to be the person of colour. And so there he was. He couldn't help himself, could he? Golden opportunity to display to the world quite how virtuous and brave he is.
Well, I'd like to see Sir Mark Rowley. He's already come out and commented on him. I'd like to see him arrested for under the new law of publishing false information.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, after Southport, people got dragged into police custody for much, much less. But we know that it's a two-tier system. I'll live for the day that someone like Zach Polanski and his cohort end up... Well, actually, talking about his cohort, we do know that 2 Green Party candidates who will remain unnamed because we're now in purdah period as well, facing local elections, but they have been arrested on suspicion of stirring up racial hatred for allegedly posting anti-Semitic comments online. So, you know, it's good, finally, that the sort of dark, murky, grim underbelly of the Green Party is being exposed. It was always there. I just don't know why nobody ever wanted to look at it. Oh, that's right, because, of course, the Green Party were oh so trendy. Chris, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's speak to Manda, who's in Essex. Hello there.
Hello, Alex, darling. How are you?
I'm all right, my love. How are you?
Very happy to speak to you for the first time, and I'd just like to say that you give me faith in the next generation, that we're not completely lost.
I think we are. That's my message. Oh. That's the problem. I'm one of the few, let's say, who seems to have the scales fallen away from her eyes, who see things as they are. At least I like to think so. I could be wrong.
You make me proud, love.
Oh. Right, what's on your mind, Manda?
The fact that I don't believe that diversity is our strength after all, and that it's a bit of a failed experiment. It's a very nice idea, but the gulf in cultural norms between the third world and us, in quotes, Western first world, is too wide. No amount of empathy, tolerance and forgiveness will work if it only comes from one side. And I just think that this dumping of the third world into the first world cannot work at the moment. Maybe try again in 100 years.
I mean, look, I think I see it slightly differently, but very similarly at the same time, which is, for me, I don't care what the container is like. I don't care about the package. I care about the contents. So when it comes to whether someone's from a rich background or a poor background, whether they are black or white or anything in between, doesn't matter so much to me. What matters to me is your culture and how you think and how you're being brought up. And actually, unfortunately, a lot of the blight on society today are white middle class British women especially, which is me. So this is what I'm saying. It's sort of like, I think to me the underlying principle should be, if we're going to allow immigration from other countries, we should prioritise those from Christian countries because they share our values, they share our culture. To me, it's that simple. You can't have all these sort of, you know, people who, frankly, completely disagree on everything and people who, frankly, hate us being imported here en masse. That is what doesn't make sense. Amanda, it's been a privilege speaking to you for the first time, my darling. Please do call again. OK, we've got to leave it there because we're going to be taking a short break. After that, we're joined by Stephen Pollard, who is a journalist and former editor of the Jewish Chronicle, to talk about what is going on for the poor Jewish community here in the United Kingdom. How scary is it? What are they feeling like? How much more can they tolerate? And what needs to happen? Very important to discuss. That's coming up after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Now, it's not exactly brand new news, is it? The horrifying events that unfolded in Golders Green, and thoughts, of course, go out to the families and the victims. But frankly, thoughts must go out to the entire Jewish community of the United Kingdom, because this has gone on too long now. Oh, when it started off with the name-calling, the filthy little tropes, the besmirchment, the open-air chants of globalise the Intifada, of free, free Palestine, of I hate Zionism, from the river to the sea. People just turned away. Oh, well, nothing to see here. Of course, Israel's a terrible country doing terrible things. They're committing a genocide. It's an apartheid state. Is it? Well, the government didn't deem it necessary to correct those myths. And yet now, we've seen a terrorist attack against a synagogue in Manchester. We've seen this attack on ambulances in Golders Green. Now, it has gone further. We've seen people being stabbed in broad daylight. How much more can the Jewish community tolerate? Well, let's speak to Stephen Pollard, who is a former editor of the Jewish Chronicle. Stephen, great to have you on the programme. I say great to have you on the programme. I wish I didn't have to speak to you today. I wish we didn't have to have this conversation. I wish it hadn't gone so far now that people I consider my brethren are living in fear for their lives.
It is... I don't like the idea of saying that I'm scared. Do you know what I mean? I just don't like that idea. When I was editor of the Jewish Chronicle, I had a death threat against me from an Islamist group. The police found my name on a hit list, and I had to have police protection for nearly 2 years. Wow. And yet, I feel far more worried now than I ever did then, because back then it was a kind of, there was a kind of discrete. It was one group with one, with a few names, and that was that. It's the randomized element of it. What we've, in the last week or so, people have started calling ambient anti-Semitism. The idea that the atmosphere itself has changed so much. I thought back in the sort of 2015-2020 period, when Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, I thought that was kind of the ceiling of anti-Semitism, that his leadership had unleashed this torrent of Jew hate amongst people who joined the Labour Party and elsewhere. And at the time, I thought, as I say, that was the ceiling. And when Corbyn was defeated, I thought the genie may go back in the bottle. How misguided that was. It wasn't. It turns out that wasn't the ceiling, that was the floor. And, what we've seen since, specifically since 2023, October the 7th, and the Hamas massacre, one of the traits of Jewish history is that when Jews are killed, when Jews are murdered, more are murdered afterwards. People are perversely inspired by that. So once we saw the Heaton Park synagogue attack, I don't think there would be a Jew in the land who didn't fear that there would be worse to come. Now, thank God no one has died since then. But in all honesty, I would, not be at all surprised if we see more deaths as a result of this, because anti-Semitism is a disease. It's unhinged. It's poisonous, and it will lead people to do terrible things.
What I struggle to understand, unless I sort of look at it through a sort of biblical prism, is anti-Semitism is a hatred as old as time, arguably the worst atrocity in all of human history was the genocide of the Jews in Nazi Germany, basically 100 years ago, almost 100 years ago today. So why is it that we still haven't found the recipe to stop it? And it's complex, isn't it? Because it's very easy to say, well, we've imported a lot of this from foreigners. That seems very clear when you look at the two individuals who were the perpetrators of the attacks of recent times. Well, we've definitely imported that from nations who are brought up to believe that Jewish people are evil. But it isn't just that, because it's infecting the minds of the young people across Britain. It's become trendy once again to hate Jewish people, to hate Israel. And I'm thinking, why? I mean, is it just because, you know, organisations like the IRGC are so blimmin' good at propaganda that they can launch a vile, disgusting, brutal animal attack against Jewish people in Israel on October the 7th and straight away have their lines and their messaging coming out on social media that we've got all these empty vessels just ready to imbibe it?
The former chief rabbi, Jonathan Sachs, Lord Sachs, described it, I think, brilliantly as an ever-mutating virus. So anti-Semitism changes according to the generations, as it were. And I mean, for what it's worth, my view is that the period after 1945, the decades after 1945 and the Holocaust, meant that anti-Semitism became, at best, as it were, impolite. It didn't disappear, but it was impolite to mention it. And it was very rarely, I mean, anti-Semitism wasn't really a problem here and across most of Europe for obvious reasons after 1945. But I think, and people of my generation, I'm 61, people of my generation were brought up, I mean, my grandma used to literally keep the metaphorical bag packed that people say, elderly Jews keep, as it were, in case they ever have to leave at short notice. And I used to think it was bizarre and perverse and she was living in the past. Because I was brought up in an age, in a generation where anti-Semitism was a thing you studied. And yes, there were outbreaks of the traditional old fascist, National Front, BNP, anti-Semitism and so on. But you never really worried about it that much. But I think the way things are now is that was the aberration, not that where we're heading now. That what we're really heading back towards now is the old... is the normality throughout previous millennia, where anti-Semitism is out there. And I think now that this genie is getting out the bottle, now, I am incredibly worried and depressed and fearful as to how you even begin to put it back in the bubble.
I agree with you, and it's going to sound extremely gloomy, but it seems to me that these things, like you said, the period of relative peace was the aberration. And it seems to me what happens from here on in throughout history is it ramps up and up and up until it becomes so frightful, so horrific, that everybody is left lost for words going, wow, how did we get to this point?
That said, there are things that need to be done. It's not as if, even if you think as you and I do, that it is going to get worse, that doesn't mean there aren't things you should be doing to try and mitigate that and to try and stop that. And the problem is that consistently this government, and in many ways the last government as well, have refused to do that. The most obvious, I mean, none of these are particularly unsaid things, like, why is the IRGC not prescribed? Labour in opposition said it would prescribe it. The Tories said that they would prescribe it. But still, we've got that. But worse, even more obvious than that, they say it can't be done until new legislation is passed. But even if that's the case, on Monday, the Iranian embassy published on its website a call for Iranians living in Britain to, as they put it, lay down their lives for the regime. In other words, that was a call for martyrdom in Britain. And what was the government's response? They called the ambassador in to see Hamish Faulkner, the Middle East minister, a junior minister, who said some hurty words to him about how awful it was. Why is the Iranian embassy allowed to operate here? Why do we not close off the embassy and kick them all out? As has happened in even Lebanon. Even Lebanon's kicked out the Iranian ambassador, and yet we're just sending him to see a junior foreign office minister.
The idea, it's this idea now that, well, it's all evil Donald Trump, poor old Iran. It's like, come on, seriously. I don't know why we live in this delusion. The only explanation I've got is perhaps there's this sort of idea that if the IRGC isn't prescribed here, at least we're one country that can keep eyes on what they're up to. Other than that, it's all balmy. Stephen, thank you ever so much. And my thoughts go out to the entire Jewish... They really do. Shalom, shalom, is what I would say. And by the way, the Met Police Chief have said we could well need a special police force to protect Jewish people. That's how bad it is in the United Kingdom. All right, we're going to take a short break now. We're then going to be joined by the wonderful, erudite, brilliant, candid Ralph Schulhammer, political theorist and professor now at Webster University in Vienna. We're going to be talking about a bit of a spat let's say, that's going on between the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and the American President Donald Trump. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, Germany. Germany, Germany, Germany. What has happened to you? Not sure, really. I thought Angela Merkel was the worst of it. And I thought Friedrich Merz seemed like a fairly sensible person. Until now. There seems to be a huge spat that's developed between Friedrich Merz and the American president after Mr. Merz, who's a centre-right Christian Democrat leader, enraged Donald Trump on Monday, claiming that Iran had humiliated Washington with shrewd negotiating tactics. Well, of course, understandably, Donald Trump has hit back and said the German Chancellor should fix his own broken country before criticising the US, and broken because of migration and energy policies. Let's speak now to Ralph Schulham, a political theorist and professor at Webster University in Vienna. I mean, he's not wrong, is he, Donald Trump? When it comes to refugees welcome, let's close down all our nuclear power stations and build a gas pipeline to Russia. I mean, Germany really were the leaders of the idiocy, weren't they?
Well, I guess, it is possible that in this case, actually, both sides are correct in their own way. I believe at this point it is fair to say that the war in Iran is not going exactly how the United States or Donald Trump in particular anticipated it. And Donald Trump is right when he says that the Germans have plenty of problems at home, so they should focus on those before they comment on US policy. So I would say they pretty much both have won their side of the argument.
But when it comes to Germany, I was speaking to the man who was responsible for monitoring Iranian uranium enrichment and nuclear arms development, and he said to me categorically that one of the countries benefiting from trade in nuclear technology with Iran was Germany. It seems to me that when it comes to the axis against Europe, or the axis against the West, Russia and Iran, to name two, with leaving to one side for now China, Germany have been front and centre in appeasement.
Well, that's also because of the size of the country, but the Europeans have been doing this for a long time. For example, in the 1980s, they built the entire contemporary pipeline network with the Soviet Union during a period when the Cold War was still very much in swing. So the very claim that is often made, and I constantly get emails to that effect, that the Europeans are vassals of the United States, and Berlin and Brussels and London, they can make no decisions on their own without first checking with the US. I think the war in Iran has shown that that is not true. I believe that maybe even the Americans thought it is true, and Donald Trump has now found out that it isn't. I mean, look at Italy, look at Spain, look at France. France not so much than the others. The UK backtracked it ultimately, but they denied the use of NATO military bases. And now, which I find is the funniest of it all, now if Germany is a vassal of the US, then how is it the case that the biggest threat of Donald Trump is that they will remove American bases from a German territory? I've never heard in the history of, vassalship that your supposed overlord is going to threaten you with not bringing troops in, but actually pulling troops out. So in a way, both Europe and the US have been talking past each other. And in times of crisis, we find out. And I don't find any of this, by the way, particularly gratifying.
It really isn't gratifying. Let's talk about geopolitics, because no doubt you know the headlines in the United Kingdom of yet another horrific attack against Jewish people in London. And my belief is, and I don't know whether you agree, that when you look at these European countries who geopolitically didn't just say, look, we're not going to join you, America, in your strikes against Iran, they went over and above to keep enunciating to their people, we're not part of this. We condemn this aggression. We're not letting planes fly out of air bases to do these strikes. We're going to block this. Don't fly over our airspace. I believe that they did this because they were deeply worried about retaliation from a fifth column of Islamists who have been shipped into our nations illegally for years now. And seemingly it's playing out anyway.
Well, I guess yes and no. I think there's a lot of truth to what you were saying. But of course, we had a similar situation in 2003 with the war in Iraq. And pretty much every European politician that sided with the United States in 2003 was ultimately voted out of office. Or in the German case, back then, the chancellor was Gerhard Schröder. He was actually projected to lose the election, but his counterpart was pro the war in Iraq, and ultimately Schröder prevailed in the elections. So I think there is simply no stomach or appetite anywhere in Western and even Eastern Europe and Central Europe to side with the United States or anybody else in the war in the Middle East. So I believe that, but you're correct, of course, this plays right into this. But the argument that is being made, and again, I get a lot of correspondence to this effect that this is not our war, that we are not affected by this. Imagine your upstairs neighbor and forgets to turn off the faucet and his bathtub is flowing over, and you can already see kind of the water coming through your ceiling. Like, you cannot then sit there, arms crossed, that the water is dripping on your head and say, well, that overflowing bathtub is none of my problems. I have nothing to do with this. Well, or as Trotsky would have said, you might not be interested in war, but war might be interested in you. And it's the same here. We are all affected by this war. Again, I agree with everybody who says we didn't start it. Correct. It shouldn't have happened. I think that's probably also correct. We shouldn't support the US. Well, there it gets trickier, because the question is, how can you get this thing resolved as quickly as possible? And if that would mean, hypothetically, even getting involved with something you disagree with on principle, but you need to resolve it to prevent the fallout from even getting worse, that might be the correct, even though a very unpleasant course of action.
How are things in Germany today? I've sort of got my eye off the ball at the moment with what's going on there in terms of whether the AfD are able to stand in elections or whether the polling is hugely swinging in their favour or not. What is the current temperature in Berlin et al.?
Well, the most recent polls we got, and the AfD is now pretty much unchallenged #1 in the polls, with about 3 to 4 percentage points ahead. They got 28%, so I think that's, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's quite similar to how Reform is currently polling in the UK. I think they're at 25% or thereabouts. But of course, as everybody knows, there are differences in the electoral system. But the trend is quite clear. The important thing, and this is true, I think, in Germany as much as in the UK, people are mostly concerned, and this connects to what you mentioned, the horrific attack on these two Jews in the UK, which is that people want that we finally solve our domestic problems. I mean, geopolitics is all very interesting and it is important, but as a general rule, if you don't have your domestic house in order, it is very difficult to project power anywhere else. And we don't have our domestic house in order. And it is very absurd, let's say, if we try to fix the Muslim world abroad, if we cannot fix the Muslim world that has come to us. And I think for most British people and continental Europeans, that's a priority.
I think you are absolutely spot on, Ralph. You always are. That's why we love you. Anyway, let's say thank you and goodbye to the brilliant Professor Ralph Schallhammer. I know he's everyone's favourite. He's certainly mine. We're going to be taking a short break now, but don't go anywhere because another big old favourite of young Alex is Mr. Andrew Fox, Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society and indeed former Major in the Parachute Regiment. We got him on to talk about the IRGC, the Muslim Brotherhood, those terror attacks and how it all interconnects with geopolitics. It's going to be a fascinating interview, so don't go anywhere. We're back just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Final hour of the show. It's flown by, hasn't it? I was going to say time flies when you're having fun, but it's not so much fun, is it? It's just there's a hell of a lot to talk about, and we all need to get together and comfort each other, don't we, with the news headlines we're seeing, because it's just relentless. Over and over and over and over and over and over again. We know what the solutions are. It's the same old story, the same old record on repeat ever since 9/11, and the same old inactivity, the same old spinelessness, political posturing to win votes, cowardice. And here we are, terror attacks on the streets of London, the terror threat level raised to severe. This has been going on since I was in sixth form, and believe me, I ain't that young anymore. When are we going to get our act together? Let's speak to the wonderful Andrew Fox, Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, former Major in the Parachute Regiment. Andrew, why? We knew. We had Robin Simcox, the counter-extremism czar, warn about these marches, that they're going to radicalise people. They could be used to corral and curate groups of nasty people who might go on to join attacks on people. We've been talking about banning the IRGC from, gosh, I don't know when. I've read so many of these commissioned independent government reports by experts saying, well, I've got a bit of a problem with them in the UK. Muslim Brotherhood as well. Why have we not done anything? Is there a logical reason? Because it's so, to me, it is so wacky that we've not prescribed the Muslim Brotherhood or the IRGC that I begin to think, well, maybe it's one of those weird situations where the security services say, do you know what? We need to keep eyes on, and better that they operate in sight rather than are pushed underground. Or is that just me hoping in vain there might be a logical answer?
Well, if we look at the IRGC, I mean, I think that's something that security services wouldn't want out in the open. I mean, that is a hostile, state-backed, subversive force operating in the UK. And I think if we could get rid of that, then we would have done it already. I mean, prescribing, I think, and banning is really only the first step in this journey. It certainly sends a message. It certainly lets our position be very clear and very well known. But then you actually have to take the next steps, which is then prosecuting and investigating organisations, charities, businesses who are affiliated with these organisations. And you have to disambiguate, of course, because the Muslim Brotherhood is more an ideology than anything else. So even if you ban it, it's actually very, very hard to then sort of, it's like playing whack-a-mole. You know, every time you find a charity or a business connected to them, you have to shut that down, and then they can just open another one. And it's a really tricky thing to do. But certainly it's the first step, and I fully support prescribing both of them.
Oh, by the way, we've just got some breaking news kind of connected to what we're talking about in some way, which is that failed asylum seeker, yeah, that's the face, Abdullah al-Badri, 34 years old, has been found guilty at the Old Bailey of trying to break into London's Israeli embassy to launch a knife attack. Well, there you go. We're letting them in on small boats, among other things. That's just, I do not understand why we're so weak on this. And part of the weakness is now, it's so terrible now, this weakness against Islamism, this fear of upsetting a community, and thus enabling the radicals to ride roughshod over our values and pose a threat on our streets, that we now have a political party gaining in the polls that seems to be on their side. We've got two Green Party candidates arrested over anti-Semitic tweets. And during one of the advert breaks there, Andrew, I was flicking on my phone and I saw you pop up in a notification on my social media because you had gone absolutely tonto at the Green Party for putting out an election campaign video. It's purdah, so I'm not going to run it for the audience. In the wake of what's happened in Golders Green, pushing the same old anti-Zionist tropes, for crying out loud.
Look, this has been the point of everything that Iran, Russia, Pakistani bots have been pushing online since 7th of October. They've taken Israel's response to the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, and they've weaponized it because they know that we take international law seriously. You know, proper countries pay attention to this stuff, and when charges and allegations are made, we take it seriously. So it's not the case that they actually want a genocide conviction in the ICJ or a genocide ruling in the ICJ against Israel. Just having put the case in is enough, because then they can quite with a straight face say Israel's accused of genocide, therefore it must be credible. And that's, you know, that's the weakness in our system. They understand that we have freedom of speech, we have a respect for the law, and those things can be weaponized. And that's exactly what they've done. We can talk about entryism. We can talk about how the Green Party, you know, has had to two potential candidates suspended. Just last week, Henry Jackson Society put out a report identifying the risk of this. My colleague Emma Schubart did incredible work on this, and two of the candidates that she identified in that report have now been suspended for exactly what we predicted. And, you know, this is so obvious and so easy to see coming. And it's because they understand how we work as a country, and they deliberately exploit our freedoms and weaponize them against us. And that's why it's so difficult to counter.
There's something else going on here.
On our own freedoms.
But there's something else going on here as well, because, you know, when the Green Party started emerging as quite a serious contender politically, I had a little look at their deputy leader, Mothin Ali, and looked at his social media footprint and thought, hey, that's a bit fruity. Did anybody else in media or journalism? Or have they all sat back and gone, oh, isn't it lovely? Oh, yay, look at Zach Polanski in Heaven nightclub giving it all that. Oh, look, isn't it beautiful? The Muslims and the LGBTQ community coming together. And yet you don't have to scrape down below the surface very far to find some real dangerous rot there. And this is my issue. I feel like so much of society in the West now has been inculcated with this cancerous culture where one minute they're reporting on what's going on in Gaza like it's a blimmin' football match, fetishising and delighting in being able to say, oh, look at all these poor people. You know, complete editorial blindness to balance. And then you just have this free pass given to a political party because they're left-wing and cute and isn't it nice, students are going to vote for them. This stuff is perilous.
Yeah, I mean, the messaging is fascinating. You know, look at how they've turned around what happened. And apparently the police is the story. This is their warped worldview. It's absolutely insane. And to then, just the day after, or 2 days after that happened, to then reiterate the blood libel that is the genocide allegation. You know, this isn't new. It's not just because of what's happened in Gaza. They've been banging on about it for years. It's Soviet-era propaganda. And it has been ever since the Palestinian cause was essentially invented in 1964 in its current format. You know, this is all the same playbook, but it's just supercharged by social media. And again, I go back to my other point. If we're going to cut down on this, how do we do it without infringing on our own freedoms of speech? It's a classic catch-22. And that's why it's so difficult to counter.
I mean, look, I'm glad you've brought this up, because what we hear all the time when we have these sorts of attacks is hollow words. You know, we've got to stand shoulder to shoulder with our Jewish community. Thoughts go out to the family members affected by this. It's all of our mutual responsibility to call out hate when we see it, la, 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 la. And people are going, look, this rhetoric, this sort of like, you know, apology, vacuous apology means nothing. It does nothing. And you've got to the nubbin of the point here. People now need policies to reflect clear action to combat this stuff. And my problem is this when it comes to super media. You are absolutely, what did I say? Stupid media? Social media. You're absolutely right. That is being supercharged, all of this stuff, by social media and indeed by invasive bot farms as an act of grey zone warfare by hostile states who want to divide our society and see attacks on our street and push their own geopolitical narrative. And I think we've sat there for too long going, oh, well, we can't touch social media. What do we do about that? But I'm like, if it was people walking around in the streets with flyers, with leaflets and propaganda like that, or, you know, stapling stuff to lampposts and billboards saying this stuff, we would act. We would do something if it was actual materials. And yet when it's, you know, letters online, it's like freedom of speech. I think we've got to get real about social media, which frankly is brainwashing people, spreading what I can only describe as evil in our society, whether it be Islamist terrorism or encouraging kids to think they got gender dysphoria. It's become a massive corrupter, a huge weakness. It's being used to essentially conduct mass psyops in this country by hostile states who frankly ban the same stuff in their own country. And I kind of feel like we've got to wake up to that. It's all very well going, can't touch social media. Oh, it might upset the tech giants. Oh, well, that's restricting all of our right to say what we want. Like I said, if this stuff was in material propaganda form being given out outside a tube station or a bus stop, someone would be handcuffed and dragged off to the local nick.
I mean, look, Alex, the government can act on this stuff when they want to. Think about Southport.
Yeah.
and how they responded to that. This is a national emergency, as far as I'm concerned right now. Not only for the Jewish community, but also for our wider society and the fact that we are under this relentless assault that you've just articulated so well. So it's a national emergency. So why aren't we seeing emergency measures like we saw after Southport and the riots? Why are we not seeing 24/7 courts? Why are we not seeing increased sentences for anti-Semitic crimes? Why are we not seeing people being held accountable, be that in the media or on social media, for when they publish these blood libels that are driving people to violence against the Jewish community? You know, there's nothing like that being brought into the pipeline. There's extra money for the Community Security Trust, thoughts and prayers, kind words, and a Cobra meeting. It's just not good enough. The solutions are there. We just don't have a government that has the willingness to actually take the solutions that are needed.
And is this, do you think, down to the sick, cynical choice of we might still get votes from that community if we don't do this? Or is it because they actually, do you think, fundamentally also agree that, for whatever reason, Jewish people, Israel, are the enemy? What do you think the motivation is for this inactivity? Because you're absolutely right, stark contrast for the things that Starmer said, the strength of his own words in rebuke of what happened after Southport, to what he's doing now, where he's basically turning around. After Southport, it's we're all the far right, we're monsters, we're thugs, televised trials, anyone and everyone being dragged out of their homes by cops, being dragged out of protests into police stations, even if they've not even opened their mouths or lifted an arm. And then here, it's a collective responsibility. It's all of us who need to call out the hate.
I mean, I never attribute to malice that which can adequately be explained by stupidity. And I think what we are seeing here is simply nothing more than blundering incompetence on the part of the government. Their whole approach to the Middle East has been a joke since they got in. They were thanked by Hamas for recognising Palestine. They reinstituted funding to UNRWA, who are known to be Hamas infested. That is, the evidence for that is now incontrovertible, that organisation is infested head to toe by Hamas, and yet we brought the funding back in. We dropped our opposition to the ICC arrest warrants for Netanyahu and the Defence Minister Gallant, which now emerges. We see the prosecutor heavily involved with Qatar and being promised to be looked after. When these things come up, it's a completely corrupt process, and yet our government dropped their opposition to that. So we've had that complete incompetence when it comes to the Middle East. And then we see them not banning the RGC, not taking action against the Muslim Brotherhood. You know, it's just incoherent. And then, of course, the logical end state of everything they've done comes to fruition, where these lies about Israel are allowed to spread unchecked. And all of a sudden, you find people getting stabbed on the streets, and they're just not good enough or sensible enough or intelligent enough to draw a direct line between their own actions and the fact people are trying to kill Jews on London streets. You know, it's utter incompetence from this government. And then to see, you know, people like Falconer, the Middle East minister, posing with the Palestinian representative and embracing him and all this stuff. You know, the message that's been sent by this government is that all of this demonisation of Israel, all of these anti-Semitic blood libels are okay. They endorse them. They've taken actions that Hamas have thanked them for. And yet to now turn around and say that anti-Semitism is wrong, there's no place for it in our society, it's just complete hypocrisy. And like I said, just incompetence at government level.
Talking about hypocrisy and incompetence at government level, apparently defence spending went down last year, despite Sir Keir Starmer repeatedly promising to raise it. In fact, just the other day he was dining out, and look how much money we're spending on defence. We're going to get real about this. Isn't this fantastic? You know, having been essentially elbowed sharply in the ribs by Donald Trump, threatening NATO. And yet, in real terms, we've been pushed down 2 places in the table of the world's biggest military spenders to 6th. Germany and India are now in 4th and 5th after they increased spending by 24% in Germany. Germany's suddenly definitely got well into defence, haven't they? What is going on here? He said the government will spend 2.5% of GDP on defence from April next year, an increase from 2.4% this year. Way, let's get out that 0.1%. That's going to change the world, isn't it? But apparently our target is to raise it to 3.5% by 2035. Even I think that's too late and way too low.
Well, of course, they still haven't released the Defence Industrial Plan, which tells us, Defence Investment Plan, the DIP, which tells us how we're going to get to that end state. But look, Labour's priorities are elsewhere. They're about to get decimated in the local elections. Their core vote is leaving them for the Green Party or Reform. You know, they're losing votes to both left and right. And they're trying to work out how on earth they're going to maintain any kind of electoral viability at the next election. And the way they're trying to do that is by fire-hosing money at the welfare electorate. You know, the welfare spending in this country is completely out of control. And until you actually find the money, you can't invest it in defence. That makes defence for Labour an incredibly low priority. Look, we even had one of our defence ministers fly out to the Middle East to go and visit the RAF regiment on the ground rather than vote to protect our veterans. You know, it's just not a priority for Labour. If it was, they'd be putting the money where the mouth is. They're not, and that's really all we need to know.
Oh, honestly, when you look at the two issues, you'd think that all those young people who can't find jobs or having to survive on welfare might make perfect members of the armed forces. Who'd have thunk? Andrew, thank you ever so much. It's always a delight speaking to you. Andrew Fox, Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, and important to remember as well, former Major in the Parachute Regiment. Thank you for your service, Mr. Fox. OK, right, we are going to take a short break. After that, it's time to have a chat. You and I, that's right, you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. 8722 on the text, like talk before you write your message, and of course you can WhatsApp me too, which is also 0344 499 1000. We're back just after this.
Across the UK, on on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. And let's welcome aboard the phone lines Vernon in Staffordshire. Good afternoon to you, Vernon. How are you doing?
Greetings, young lady. Excellent show as always.
Oh, I thank you, Verns.
So sorry to tell you what I'm about to tell you, Alex, but this is just the beginning.
I know.
This is just the start of complete and utter closure of what this once great country was. Years and years and years of unlimited, unchecked, unvetted, illegal migration has caused this situation. So from my point of view, the government is complicit, just like the Conservatives were complicit. Their first task is to protect the citizens of this country. Keir Starmer is complicit. I would say Rishi beforehand, Theresa May, all of them.
Pretty much all of them. Let's not forget Boris.
Yeah, no, Boris. But the thing is with Boris, we knew he was a charlatan. The current person that we've got as a Prime Minister is the very worst type of Prime Minister. Crocodile tears, I call him. He calls a meeting when Jewish people are killed or stabbed or whatever. It's frightening, Alex. It's a terrible, terrible time to be alive. I've got young children who are 11 and 13. They can't catch the bus to school, Alex.
Why?
They can't catch the bus because they're not safe. They're not safe. Thankfully, we are able to take them to school. I work 16, 18 hours a day. My other half takes the children to school and keeps them safe. They can't allow them to catch the bus. Can you imagine, Alex? Catching the bus in Staffordshire is banned for 11-year-olds and 13-year-olds.
And
who do I blame? I blame the government.
Then you've really got to sort of, ask yourself when they go to school, how safe are they there? Because it seems to me they're being corrupted and brainwashed into all becoming little wokeatrons to continue the destruction of this country in the future. I'm sure that doesn't apply to your well-brought-up and right-minded kids. But this is it. You sort of think, wow, we could change the government. We can finally crack down on this. And you kind of feel that the rot is so set in generationally that it's going to get worse before it gets better. Although, do you not look to America and Donald Trump and think, actually, with the right people in power, the ship can be turned around?
No, Alex, I don't. Your friend and my sort of, I suppose, mentor, Nigel Farage, lovely man that he is just not going to have the tools in his toolbox. Can you honestly see, Alex, us deporting planes leaving Birmingham, Gatwick, Manchester? I mean, my home city is Birmingham. It's a ghetto.
Oh gosh!
It's the home. It's the home for the jihadi.
God, I'm glad you said that, Vernon. I've been looking into Birmingham lately because we all saw what happened with Aston Villa and the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. Then I was looking at. We can't talk a lot about the local elections because we are now in Perth at a period where you've got to be careful of what you say on air. But one thing I can say, because this isn't about particular candidates, is looking in Birmingham, and I was looking at sort of a heat map electorally, there are multiple wards, not just one, I think it's about 2 or 3, if not more, whose demography is 100% Muslim. And I'm like, that's crazy. We have now got, I actually think Birmingham's going to be the first place in the United Kingdom, or at least a subsection of it, to declare itself a caliphate. Because anybody who's looked at Middle Eastern history and demographic changes in places like Lebanon, that's how it happens. All of a sudden, you get the independent candidates, as they're called, independent. In Lebanon, it was Hezbollah who started standing in for elections and winning it in the south of Lebanon. Then before you know it, they're running it. That's like, this is now Hezbollah area. Then before you know it, there are rockets coming out of it. And the Lebanese government themselves can't do anything about it. And you think, blimey, is that going to happen here?
Yeah, Alex, they in Birmingham County Council will with pride fly the Pakistani flag.
Well, this is the thing. It's I do like to think or hope that actually, because we've had a dearth of political pragmatism for decades now. I do like to think that if we suddenly got the right sort of leadership, whoever he or she may be, that it's amazing actually how quickly things can turn around, how quickly mindsets and moods can change on certain stuff. We're incredibly vulnerable and culpable as human beings to go along with whatever the trend of the day is, you know, the madness of crowds, so to speak. So if the mood music changes, I am a little bit more hopeful than you that the majority will start dancing to it. But I'm not going to hold my breath until I see it happen. Vernon, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's speak to Stephen in Manchester. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Right, my comment is much in line with your prior caller in that demography is truly destiny. And we have had decades now of a political establishment who have one way and another opened the borders. But we've also had a collapse of the indigenous birth rates, and that's backed up by grand-scale abortion, 10.9 million, mainly...
Isn't it something like 50% of all babies conceived are aborted or something utterly insane?
Well, we're actually replacing ourselves. The whole march of the feminist agenda, the obsession with alternate lifestyles, the collapse of the birth rates, the collapse of traditional family. We are facing in here to the end of the British story. I was at a National Trust property yesterday as an example, just one of many. And as I walked around the grounds of this beautiful, iconic property, it was utterly festooned with people of immigrant background, huge numbers. It's not at all unusual to see this either in institutions or parks or streets. Once you replace the demography to a certain percentage, it is over. And 50 years hence, if we haven't, and I don't know how it's going to be done, but dramatically turn the birth rates down, because if we want the continuity of culture, the transmission of that culture, it's no good one late-stage baby, age 43. It's no good.
Well, look, I mean, look. I'm 42. If I wanted a child and could have a child, I'll go and do it. Thank you very much. And actually, I think that in terms of the age that people are having babies is going up and up and up, and there's more and more women who are older having children. You talk about the march of feminism. I think it's something different to this, and I'll tell you what I think it is. And I think you're kind of on the right lines here, because we always thought, oh, it's because people can't buy houses. I don't think it's because people can't buy houses, even though that's a huge problem, because living all over the world, and even looking now, the birth rates are highest among the poorest. It's about luxury and flippancy and instant gratification, because my generation, quite frankly, have been brought up with, if they want it, they can have it. They haven't had to struggle. They haven't had to strive. And that's in all fronts. That is in terms of, I want to go on a foreign holiday. I want the latest iPhone. I want to go for a night out with my mates. I've got a hangover. I don't see why I should go to work. I want to work from home instead. I want to have endless amounts of sex without consequence. And I think it is this that is the reason that a lot of people are not having children, because frankly it's a lack of responsibility or an appetite to do anything that requires responsibility. But I would say this, all too often the finger of blame is pointed at women here, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be, in part, but I think a lot of men need to turn around and say to the younger generation of men, you are the problem here, because women biologically are programmed to want to have children, right? It is the men who aren't necessarily, who want to live Peter Pan lifestyles, who don't want to stand by their women. And you might not like the fact that foreign communities have a higher birth rate, but that's because, frankly, their men want to have as many children as possible. It's a sign of honour. if they have plentiful children, even plentiful wives. They want to reproduce until the cows come home. And so they are. I'm afraid it's our men in the West who are like, I don't know, I don't want to get married, I don't want to have children, I want to go on, I'm going to get married tomorrow, so I better go on a 2-week stag do so I can go to a strip club. What is wrong with you? This is what happens with the death of moral order and a social framework of mores. That, to me, is the heart of all of this. And until we have a conversation about it, and until actually men of a certain generation look at younger men and say, grow up, get real, that birth rate is not gonna change. You aren't going to be able to change other communities in terms of making them have fewer kids. You've got to make sure that our people are doing the same. And we need to start having a conversation about this, because it ain't about buying houses. It's about a mindset. Oh, Stephen, thank you ever so much. You gave me a great opportunity to get that one off my chest, because it really does bother me, because we're getting this totally wrong. OK, we're going to take a short break now. And ironically, talking about changes of demography, we're going to, of course, talk about a #1 favourite story on this channel and everywhere else, which is migration. But apparently, here we go, a little chink of light perhaps, migrant crossings have fallen. What's going on? Let's catch up with that story just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to the show. We're joined by the brilliant Laurie Wastall now, Associate Editor of The Daily Sceptic. Now, call me a sceptic, but apparently migrant crossings have fallen because smugglers have been forced to use weaker engines. What's going on there?
Well, good to be with you, Alex. Yes, it's it does seem that this year, compared with previous years, the numbers of boat crossings are down a little. I mean, so it's 35%, and that's so far in the year. I think it is always these kinds of figures and what they mean have to be taken with a bit of a pinch of salt. There's obviously lots of different factors that go into that key number of how many migrants are making the crossings. But the suggestion is from Border Force that we're not really quite sure who has been doing this exactly, but the supply chain of the boats, and in particular their engines, has been disrupted somewhat, and that makes it more difficult for them to get to that crucial meridian line, which is, of course, into our waters, from which they're, of course, towed rather ridiculously all the way to our shores. And so that does seem to have had some effect. And there's another point, is that seemingly because of changes perhaps in the way that the French are patrolling their beaches, more of these launches are actually coming from Belgium, which is of course a little bit further as well, and so again that's having a small effect. But that said, I mean, there's still thousands of people coming over the channel in the first 4 months of this year, only down by 35%, so it's not as if at all this problem has gone away.
Yeah, I mean, also, we're minded to put all the focus, aren't we, on boats crossing the channel, but there's multiple ways that people get into this country illegally, whether they're coming in on student visas and overstaying, whether they're coming in on randomly allocated work visas from, like, to go, I don't know, carve meat in a kebab shop, or whether it be people who said, oh, you know, my cousin wants to come join me, or people in the backs of lorries, or people just flying in and then losing their passports. And so the bigger picture is always unclear. But in terms of Europe and the immigration league tables, I don't know where we stand in comparison to Germany. Donald Trump has turned around and said that Friedrich Merz Germany is broken by immigration. Haven't been to Germany for a while, but following Angela Merkel's refugees welcome, they suddenly were on the front line of the bombardment. How bad is Germany compared to us, or are we sort of level pegging, do you reckon?
Well, certainly Germany have had tremendous migration problems since, of course, as you mentioned, Angela Merkel's Wir schaffen das, we can do this moment in 2015, where she just sort of elected very much against what her own policy was, and certainly what her voters in her country wanted, to say, actually, no, I want to be, I want to be moral, I want to virtue signal, I'm going to bring in over 1 million Syrian migrants during that migrant crisis. And, well, it sort of sounded nice at the time, if you're Angela Merkel, perhaps, but of course that has led to tremendous social problems in Germany. There's obviously the general problem of just the integrating those people, the welfare bill and so on, but also, especially in the past 2 or 3 years, there have been a series of awful terror attacks, in particular the Magdeburg Christmas market attack, for instance, in Germany, that the viewers will remember, and just these awful atrocities linked to migration in that country. And again, it's affecting their politics, and their Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who of course was the individual that Trump was criticizing in particular, and sort of much like, well, it's a different situation they have there, but certainly they're not taking the kinds of robust action that many of their voters would like to see. And that is one reason why the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, their right-wing party that's often denounced as far right, is actually being kept entirely out of the government, but it is rising in the polls. And I know you're very familiar with European politics yourself, Alex, but that's a key development in just recent months. They're actually topping the polls in Germany, which has not been seen before, and it's quite a blow to their sort of centrist political class.
I wanted to talk to you about this. It's not really a surprise, is it? Yet again, another crime committed by someone who's come into the country illegally. This one has been convicted. A man who tried to climb into the Israeli embassy in London carrying 2 knives has been found guilty of preparing a terror-related knife attack. Abdullah al-Badri, 34, had only arrived in the UK in a small boat from France 16 days before the attempted attack on the 28th of April 2025. It was the second time he had entered the UK illegally by small boat in 4 years. It just doesn't make sense that we know that terrorists are not only lining their pockets with the proceeds of this crime, that is, once upon a time, they're like, oh, let's sell some opium to fund our extremism and buy our weapons and blow stuff up. Now they're like, wow, isn't it better to use migration, print false documents, charge people to get in small boats? But it's also a nifty way of them to get their operatives into the country. This is a national threat, a national security threat. And still we stand by and go, there's nothing we can do about this international law. I don't swallow that anymore.
No, quite right, and I think many of your viewers won't, and many of the public won't. And I think it's an absolutely extraordinary understanding that we're supposed to have the international law, as you say, sort of dictates we have, or really the ECHR and all of our human rights laws sort of mandate that we sort of take whoever these people are coming in almost at their word and sort of assume that they're well intentioned and sort of give them the benefit of the doubt in all these ways, whether it's when they come in and how we treat them. I mean, very few of these individuals who are, of course, crossing into the country illegally from the moment they do that, very, very few of them are prosecuted, for instance. Instead, they go into the asylum system, and there are various, they're given, accommodation, of course, in hotels, infamously. They're given a stipend and so on, and then they get to go on this endless legal merry-go-round of appeals and so on. So we treat them in this way, which is, oh, well, maybe you're actually a very nice and deserving person, and if you're not, well, who actually, picks up the tab for that, or rather, who suffers the consequences? It's potentially the British public. In this case, an attack on the Israeli embassy, importing someone with, nasty anti-Semitic views, it would seem. But we don't really know who these people are, and it's not. We shouldn't assume that they are all well-intentioned, because the result of that is that when they're not, the British public pay the price.
Well, we know that, don't we? And this is what I find so staggering, that, I've been sort of suggesting to people that a direction of travel could be private prosecutions against government policy, because there are two examples of both of them were Egyptian men. One was wanted in Egypt for an alleged bomb plot connected to, I believe, the Muslim Brotherhood, who was put up in a migrants' hotel in West London. He went on to rape a woman in Hyde Park. Another one was a man who was wanted for murder, who came to this country and said, oh, I'm wanted for murder. Weren't me, it was my brother. He was put up in a hotel as well and went on to rape a woman in Brighton. Now, both these people, one's a terror suspect, albeit in a different country. One's a murder suspect, albeit in a different country. And yet we've just gone, oh, we better give them a hotel. No need for eyes on. Because if we thought they were a threat to society, how on earth were they allowed to wander the streets late at night and snatch up women and rape them? This is what I find so astonishing. If someone was arrested on suspicion of terrorism in this country, or arrested on suspicion of murder, they ain't going to be wandering around doing whatever they like.
No, absolutely. And I mean, if you compare the way that the government, say, treats the Bully XL dog, which is supposedly to really clamp down and potentially destroy this breed that is known to be dangerous, and there's lots of sort of government information campaigns about it and so on. That individual had been placed in that hotel in Brighton and was there with two of his friends, essentially scouring the streets at night for women he could prey upon. No one had been warned of that. There's no sign saying, oh, actually, you should be worried about this potential attacker that's living here. And essentially the British public are just, allowed to be preyed upon with no warning and no protection from the government in this way. It's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, as you say, Alex.
Laurie, it's always great catching up with you. Thank you ever so much for coming back on the show. I'm going to do some of your messages now, and after that we're going to take a little break, and I'm going to give you a travel update. But I think there's probably going to be time at the end of the show if you wanted to have a chin wag. So 03444991000 is the number if you'd like Faith to take that down, and then if we can squeeze in some calls, and my gut's telling me I think we're going to be able to, she'll give you a call back. It's your normal network rate. Someone's just messaged, censorship alert. Did you just blur and silence Alex between 12:09 and 12:10, or is that being done by the UAE? No, it's because we have to be ultra sensitive because we've got elections going on. And so it's a bit like sort of walking through minefields, and oftentimes a guest might say something who aren't sort of as scripted in the rules of Purdah, which might sound a little bit like promoting one party or over the other, or demonising a party, or anything that could taint the neutrality of the elections. And say, poor old Ted, he's got people being charged with crimes that we're not allowed to talk about because it's therefore a criminally active case. He's got Purdah to deal with. Honestly, I can see the beads of sweat on his forehead as his finger hovers over the dump button, just in case we get in trouble with Ofcom. So that's what's going on there. Afternoon, Alex. The birth rates of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Spain and Portugal all currently have historically low birth rates. These are countries emigrating Brits move to. Low birth rates are not a global problem, not just a British problem. I know, and it's because of what I said. It's because, in fact, it's more of a problem the richer nations get, it seems to me, the lower the birth rate. Now, there's various reasons why this might be the reason. One is the idea that in times of strife, animals, if you will, have a lot more babies in case some don't survive. So possibly that's part of it. The more affluent you are, the smaller your litter. I think it's something else. I think in the developing world, we're getting, and I said it earlier, we're getting so used to automatic convenience. Everything's easy. Gone are the days where you're sort of doing a hand wash and winding a mangle. No, everything has got to be instant gratification, as simple as possible. You know, don't even break a sweat. Don't do anything that brings you discomfort. Even an unpleasant word is enough for you to go, oh, I've been so triggered, I need some time off. It's just, this is why, because actually having children and having a family is a huge responsibility. It's serious business. And I just don't think people in the developed world, when they live on their little phones like this, buying everything, I want my takeaway in 10 minutes. Oh, I've just seen something advertised on Instagram, so I want to buy this new £2 T-shirt from China. Oh, I just tried it on and it's too big, so I'm going to send it to the charity shop and just buy another. This is the problem. Is that life's so easy that we've all become feckless and lazy and allergic to responsibility, and there's no bigger responsibility than starting a family. All right, let's take a short break, shall we? Now, when we come back, you're probably aware it's a bank holiday weekend, early May bank holiday weekend. I'm going to be here, but I have to commute to get there. So what is the travel situation going to be like, as many people might be jetting off to go and see families and friends, or just enjoying a little short break perhaps? We're going to be catching up with the one and only Simon Calder, the travel correspondent from The Independent, the guru of the rails and the roads and the skies and everything in between. He's going to give us an update just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Are you going somewhere? Have you got there? Are you on your way there? Are you going to enjoy the lovely long weekend? Unfortunately, I don't think the weather's going to hold up that well. But let's find out about the roads and the rails and the flights and everything else with the brilliant Simon Calder. Everyone's saying it's going to be frantic Friday. Early May bank holiday will be the busiest on the UK's roads in a decade, thus says the RAC. How bad is it out there?
Well, it's going to be very, very busy until about 7 o'clock tonight, Alex, and that's fairly predictable because you've got all the usual commuter and business traffic mingling with who are thinking, great, can't wait to make our getaway. So right now, the M25 really busy, the M11 going towards Stansted, that's got problems. The M1 is also around close to where I am in Derby, having some problems. So these things are going to pop up everywhere, but there is some predictability about when things are going to be worst. So yes, today, if you are listening, watching at home, then stay there till at least 7 o'clock. As you say, busiest early May bank holiday for 10 years. And crucially, tomorrow is going to be the worst of all, according to the RAC figures. They say particularly 10 till 3 in the afternoon is going to be bad Saturday, Sunday in terms of congestion, but they've also picked out 10 till 12 noon tomorrow, and they have pointed a big red sign at the M5 going south of Bristol towards Taunton. So exactly as you say, the weather's not going to be great, but it's not going to stop an awful lot of people heading for the West Country. By bank holiday Monday, things, of course, go into reverse, and it's going to be 10 till 6. That is going to see the big problems on the road. So if you can start early or start late, that is definitely going to be to your advantage.
How did the RAC do that? How do they get out a crystal ball and say, well, it's going to be Bristol to Taunton on the M5 between 10 and 12? How is that done?
OK, well, they know how many people are going to be travelling because they go out and ask them in surveys. But then in terms of the traffic, you can just there's so much historic data, Alex. I mean, I could recite the other places you're going to see problems, which are going to be, of course, on the mostly on the western side of the M25, all the way around from the M1, going round past Heathrow through to the M23 Gatwick turnoff. In the northwest, it's going to be the M6, particularly where people are peeling off to go to either Blackpool or the Lake District, and then basically in reverse on Monday. So yeah, it's pretty much same old, I'm afraid.
What about railways? Are they sort of surviving the bank holiday period, or are they also going to be pretty chocker?
I'm afraid I wrote the headline May Misery for bank holiday rail travellers. That's because we've got obviously 2 bank holidays this month, and there's a couple of bits of work which are taking place both Saturday, Sunday, Monday now and Saturday, Sunday, Monday at the end of the month, and they're really quite significant. The most awkward is the East Coast Main Line. This is, of course, the line which runs from London to Yorkshire, North East England and into Scotland, and it is completely closed just north of York. And that means there's going to be our old friends, the rail replacement bus from Darlington to York. And if you're making a journey such as Newcastle to London, that's going to take about 2 hours longer than normal. Of course, nobody likes a rail replacement bus. The other one is going across the Pennines, lots and lots of work going on there. So Leeds to Manchester, that's going to take about half an hour longer because you're going to have to avoid lovely Huddersfield. And elsewhere, yep, lots of closures down in the London area, as there tends to be this bank holiday weekend. London Charing Cross Station, right in the heart of the capital, is going to be closed because they're doing work there. And wherever you're going, always worth checking that you're going to be able to reach your destination before you set off.
Oh, I think our good friend, the rail replacement bus, is probably going to feature in my life over the next few days. Pray for me, Simon. Thank you ever so much for giving us the updates there. Fascinating as well about how the RAC can turn around and go, right, between 10 and 12, between Bristol and Taunton on Saturday, it's going to be chock-a-block. And I'm like, wow, really clever stuff.
Yeah, if it turns out like that, of course. If it doesn't, it's not so clever, is
Do
it?
you not trust the RAC? The Royal Automobile Club?
I love that. I
no
trust
less.
Simon Calder.
I trust everyone does. He's everyone's
Simon Calder
favourite.
is one of those guests that when
National
I first started
treasure.
in radio, which was a while ago now, I think him, Justin Urquhart Stewart were two of the first people I kind of interviewed.
Yeah.
And I was like 7 at the time. They were still doing this stuff.
Well,
and they're still doing it now.
He's saying he's like Methuselah or something. If you were 7,
I can't imagine.
Simon Calder's a spring lamb.
He's a spring lamb. Well, compared to some, he's a spring lamb. Compared to, say, Kevin O'Sullivan, for example.
Well, everything compared to Kevin
it's a
O'Sullivan's
fair
a spring
point,
lamb.
isn't it? So,
yeah. Oh, bless our Kev.
I know, indeed. Everybody's moaning, aren't they? Going, well, you know, what's happened to the summer? It's like, it's not summer.
It hasn't started yet. We've had an early
why would
preview.
it start?
I'll
It's
tell
only
you what's
just
good
stopped
news.
out of winter.
I'll tell you what's good news.
Go on,
But
what's
the thing
good
is, though,
news?
I feel like I get completely gaslit and trolled by weather headlines.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm getting gaslit and trolled by my weather app. Have you noticed this these days? You go like, what's the forecast going to be? It's like, well, doom, gloom, rain. And you're like, eh?
Sunny out there.
But I heard the other day that El Nino is going to be like doing stuff and it's going to be Bakeroo.
Nino's back.
Oh, Nino. Yeah, he's back.
Oh, that's my
I
favourite
love El
storm.
Nino.
My favourite storm.
When he comes into town, I'm like, yes, son, no need
He's
for
the
patio
best.
heaters.
I mean, we had Storm Brenda, rubbish, but
Yeah.
Nino, different league.
Nino's the one.
The Don.
The
Don.
Nino is the Don.
The meteorological Don.
Do you remember that amazing summer of over 40 degrees when things started setting on fire? I loved it. I felt I was the only person.
It was 40 degrees for like 2 days, though, wasn't it?
It was like 2 hours of
Or
2
2
days,
hours,
is
yeah.
it? You know, and I remember walking home from Paddington to Earls Court through Hyde Park at the peak of it, and I was like, I don't know what people are moaning about. It's fine.
It's quite nice, wasn't it?
Yeah, I liked it.
But it's calming down. What isn't calming down, of course, the other sort of weather, the weather of terrorism, which has been upon us for many, many years.